Before we get into the video, do not forget to like, comment and subscribe. So a drug dealer who called himself the Devil has been jailed for the disposal of a body of a jazz musician and murder of a rival. Now the Devil moniker for the teenage drug dealer is befitting because 19-year-old Emeka Dawuda-Wodu was an unremorseful, compassionless and a very cruel and sadistic person. At a mere 19 years old, he was one of 3 men responsible for the stabbing to death of 35-year-old Ebrima Cham in what prosecutors called an orgy of violence. An orgy of violence. That means that these cretins gained gratification and pleasure of seeing another person hurt, bleeding, watching the loss of life around them seep out of their souls. How sick and perverse can you be? The 3 young men included Emeka Wodu, skulked around Ebrima Cham's property in Hounslow in December 2019 when he was asleep, and as he lay in bed, these 3 guys stood above the victim, pulled out knives and began to stab him repeatedly until he died. Now Mr Cham was no innocent person. After all, he was a drug dealer known as the Grim Reaper, whom had a reputation for robbing rivals of their drug stashes. Prosecutors believe he was murdered because he boasted about robbing one of the guys that murdered him, Zimele Dube. And if that's not sadistic enough, 19-year-old Emeka Dawuda-Wodu, early that day in December, he and his pals from his drug dealing gang had chopped up a body belonging to a talented jazz musician, 53-year-old William Algar, and disposed of his body as if it was the most common thing to do in the world. This was after they left certain body parts to decompose and fester inside the property. Now, it's been alleged that the body was left to decompose for 2 weeks before the gang held a meeting to decide what to do with it. The decomposing head and torso of William Algar was later found at the Barnes home where he had earlier been killed, after the property was taken over as a drug trap house the Old Bailey had. William Algar was an avid drug dealer and suffered from mental health difficulties. This made it easier for Emeka and his drug gang to take over the guy's home and abuse the victim to a degree. Imagine Emeka and his mates not only cut up the body, but they left the head and decomposing torso in the house to rot and fester, again for 2 weeks. This was the same house they used to bag up drugs, sell drugs and distribute drugs, and even get other fiends to come in and take samples. For their disgusting crimes, 19-year-old Emeka Wodu, 33-year-old Zimele Dube, and 40-year-old Simon Emmons were all sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Ebrima Cham. Now, if you had to categorize Emeka Wodu as a type of person, he is definitely psychotic. After all, the atrocities of his crimes are immense. I mean, it's too much to put into words. Not only did this guy refuse to go to court for sentencing, instead what he did was opt to sulk in his cell, and he was told he would serve at least 31 years in prison. He was also sentenced with 2 other men for perverting the course of justice over the disposal of William Algar's body, and he was also convicted of what can only be described as a ferocious stabbing of a 3rd victim, whom miraculously survived the stabbing. Emeka stabbed his victim while he was wanted by police, just to put it into perspective what kind of person he was. Not only was Emeka manipulative, but he was also a coward too. To put it into context, he knew he was going to be surrounded with a lot of like-minded individuals in prison, and he would no longer be in control of his surroundings, coupled with the fact he knew he was going to get a life sentence. Therefore, what this idiot tried to do was convince the courts and the people around him, like the screws, that he wasn't responsible for his crimes, he was coerced. Again, while he was in custody, the court heard Emeka was recorded trying to plot ways to avoid justice, which included pretending to have been exploited and have been coerced into the drug world, despite the fact he was running around the streets screaming he is the devil a moniker that gained him both notoriety and superiority. All I can say is stay safe, safe.